Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Arundhati Ramanan. Here are the top headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. G7 nations reach an agreement in Italy to extend a $50 billion loan to Ukraine using frozen Russian assets. Prime Minister Modi lands in Italy, meets leaders from G7 nations. He is expected to bring up issues faced by the global south during his scheduled bilaterals with leaders. Another day and more records fall on Dalal Street. Nifty shrugs off weak global cues to hit a fresh all-time high for the third day in a row. Sensex posts a record close once again. Markets are now 4% higher over the last 2 weeks. That's the biggest two-week gain since December 2023. The union government is considering a 60,000 crore rupee outlay for electric buses. Sources say that the program would be aimed at rolling out over 8 lakh e-buses by 2030. The government is also considering credit guarantee and risk reduction fund to encourage banks to lend to e-bus operators. Vodafone plans to sell its entire stake worth about $2.3 billion in Indus Towers next week. As per Reuters, the agency adds that this move is part of the firm's effort to repay its debt. CNBC TV 18 learns that the food safety regulator has ordered a further probe into spices made by MDH and Everest. Sources say a recall of several spice varieties has also been ordered after adverse reports from 5 states. Process of levying penalties to begin soon. Mortal remains of the 46 Indian nationals who died in the horrific Kuwait apartment blaze reached Kochi. 23 among them were from Kerala. Kerala CM Pinarayi Vijayan, Minister of State for External Affairs Kirti Vardhan Singh, along with other ministers, paid homage to the victims. Israeli tanks advance into western Rafah even as the United Nations-backed ceasefire plan stays in limbo. UN has warned that more than 1 million people are expected to face death and starvation by the middle of July. At $45 billion, Tesla CEO Elon Musk retains the largest ever executive pay package at a US-listed firm, but the shareholder approval may still see legal challenges. Tesla shareholders also approved Musk's plan to move the company's state of incorporation to Texas. Also on the show, sources say that the government is likely to present the union budget on the 22nd of July. Real estate developers submit their wish list, wants the government to focus on green buildings and tax breaks for women home buyers. Those were the headlines that we're tracking for you this evening. But first up, the day's market action. Records continue to tumble on Dalal Street as the Nifty hit new peaks for the third straight session. The sensex posted a record close, but the index is still 200 points away from intraday records. Mid-caps continue to outperform, with the index hitting new highs for the fifth straight session. For the week, however, Nifty and Sensex gained for the second straight time, recording its biggest two-week gain since December 2023. India's trade deficit has widened to a little under $24 billion in May, while exports for the month rose nearly 9% compared to April. Imports shot up by 15%. Commerce Secretary Sunil Bhartwal attributed the rise in exports to growth in outbound shipments of pharmaceutical products and engineering goods. But the big headline this evening, the G7 summit has commenced in Italy. Leaders have agreed on an outline deal to provide $50 billion of loans for Ukraine. This will be done using interest from Russian assets frozen after Moscow's invasion of its neighbor in 2022. US President Biden said that Ukraine will be provided with 5 Patriot missile defense systems. He said, and I quote, "Everything we have is going to Ukraine until its needs are met," end of quote. The leaders also shared a light moment as they attended a skydiving demonstration program in a golf course. The Gaza conflict, artificial intelligence, Africa are some of the other important items on the agenda. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has also arrived in Italy. He is scheduled to hold crucial bilateral meetings with G7 leaders over the next few days. It is expected that the Indian delegation will bring up key issues faced by the global south. This is Modi's first foreign trip since he took charge as India's Prime Minister for the third time. Sanjay Suri joins us now from Puglia in Italy. Sanjay, what's the mood like at the G7 summit?
A lot of world divisions have got a lot sharper here at the G7 in Puglia, here in the south of Italy. We have a decision from G7 here to fund Ukraine's war against Russia with loans against interest on frozen Russian assets. That is a move to which Russia has threatened a strong retaliation. A peace summit follows now in Switzerland, but after the hardening of G7 positions here in Italy, that peace summit is beginning to look already more like a war summit. a toughening with Russia is the prime outcome of the G7 here. From India, Prime Minister Modi has been consolidating India's position through the big outreach summit, as it is called. That is the session on the second day, and that is when a lot of invited leaders, not from the G7, address the G7. He has also held a number of bilateral meetings with a number of G7 members, with President Macron and with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak in the early part of the day, and then we have meetings due with Chancellor Scholz, with Prime Minister Meloni of Italy, of course, and with other leaders likely to follow later in the day. The Prime Minister continues to push India's case for a greater say for the global south, but that, of course, is an effort, that is a process. We are not looking at some big bang outcome on that score at the G7 here. But a footnote. The original G7, we think, would be a gathering of the great and grand, but consider Prime Minister Sunak of Britain is as good as gone 3 weeks from now. The party of Chancellor Scholz of Germany won just 13% of the vote in the EU elections just concluded, and those elections really rattled Macron. He had to suspend the National Assembly because of the win of the far right. The popularity on the other side of Prime Minister Ishida of Japan is down to 21%. He may have to go in September. The popularity of Prime Minister Trudeau in Canada is at a record low, and he's expected to lose next year. Biden has his back to the wall against Trump. Only Prime Minister Meloni is on a winning streak. Someone here described this as a gathering of one triumphant woman and 6 dead men walking.
This decision to confiscate or to freeze $350 billion of Russian central bank assets, which are largely in Belgium, and use the interest on these of $5 billion a year to pay off the loan, loan payment by Ukraine for $50 billion aid to them is outrightly against international law.
US can ill afford to antagonize China at this juncture, because if China and Russia were to formalize a military alliance, that would be America's worst geopolitical nightmare come true. So the deeper the West gets involved in the Ukraine war, the less space they have to deal with China's expansionism.
One of the key issues would be the global digital infrastructure. That was a major point of focus. And AI, which is part of the global digital infrastructure, is one of the items on the agenda of the G7.
That's the latest from the G7 summit, but the government is expected to consider setting up a mega electric bus program with an outlay of 60,000 crore rupees. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 that it aims to deploy 8 lakh electric buses across cities by 2030. Sources also say that the third iteration of the government's EV incentive scheme, FAME, could be tabled in the upcoming union budget. Parikshit Luthra is here with more. Parikshit, what are you picking up on this front?
With the NDA 3.0 now sworn in, the focus is coming back to electric mobility. The first thing that the government would want off its list is FAME 3. There were proposals earlier before the elections that a 10,000 crore FAME scheme should be brought in, and we now believe that that scheme would be there in Budget 2024. A final nod is awaited in the next few days. Secondly, and what could be a bigger trigger for India's electric vehicle ecosystem, would be the Mega E-Bus Mission program for 2030, which has an outlay or proposed outlay of 60,000 crores. So the government aims to deploy at least 8 lakh buses, 2 lakh through state transport undertakings and 6 lakh through private bus operators by 2030. This is an extremely ambitious program, and the government officials believe this could be a game changer. Currently, it is at a proposal stage. It has to be decided upon by the Prime Minister's office, the Ministry of Heavy Industries, the Finance Ministry and the Ministry of Commerce. How will it work? Well, it will be a credit guarantee and a de-risking fund for banks, because of which they'll find it easier to lend to private bus operators who want to buy electric buses on scale. A very large chunk of the 60,000 crore package would go towards incentivizing setting up of charging infrastructure across strategic routes in the country, because bus operators want a lot of chargers and high-powered chargers across the country if they want to have an extensive electric bus fleet. So this package will also take care of that with a payment security mechanism that will work on a PPP basis. So let's see how things work out. But we believe that a cabinet note to this effect can be moved by September or October this year, and maybe by the end of the year we could see some movement on the bus program. But this will be perhaps one of the biggest decisions for electric mobility that India has taken so far, and perhaps the biggest step towards electric bus adoption anywhere in the world.
Right, Parikshit, many thanks for those details. Now, telecom major Vodafone is looking to sell its entire stake worth $2.3 billion in Indus Towers. A Reuters report says that the stake sale could be done through block deals next week. This move is part of the firm's effort to repay its debt. Vodafone currently owns over 21% stake in Indus Towers via various group entities. The final size of the stake sale is yet to be decided. Bajaj Housing Finance has filed its IPO papers with market regulator SEBI for its proposed public issue. The company plans to raise 7,000 crore rupees. The public offering comprises a fresh issue of 4,000 crore rupees and an offer for sale of 3,000 crore rupees from its parent company Bajaj Finance. In more corporate news, Tata Group is in talks to acquire majority stake in Indian unit of Chinese smartphone company Vivo. According to a Money Control report, discussions between the two companies have reached an advanced stage. The report has highlighted that Vivo is negotiating for a higher valuation than what the Tatas are offering. The government will launch the 10th round of commercial coal block auction next week. The new round of auction will see 62 blocks on offer without end-user curbs. It will be launched by newly appointed Coal Minister G. Kishan Reddy. Coal produced from these commercial blocks can be sold by the allocatee in the free market. The food safety regulator has ordered a further probe into spices made by MDH and Everest. Sources have told CNBC TV18 that a recall of several spice varieties has also been ordered after adverse reports from 5 states. Process of levying penalties will also begin soon. Timsi Jaipuria joins us now with all of those details. Timsi, what does this mean for both of those companies?
Well, that's right. Sources have told CNBC TV18 that food safety regulator FSSAI has begun a fresh detailed probe into spices made by MDH and Everest. Sources have told CNBC TV18 that FSSAI has also ordered a recall of batches of several spices made by MDH and Everest, a process which will soon begin on ground. Not just this, currently the regulator is assessing the penal action and the quantum of penalty that will be levied on MDH and Everest, as they have been found unsafe for human consumption. Sources add the move comes on the back of the fact that the regulator has received adverse reports by 5 states, which include Punjab, Rajasthan, Himachal Pradesh, Telangana and Goa. Remember, these states, along with other states, had actually undertaken a drive based on FSSAI's order that a pan-India action for random testing and sampling of spices is required, and the action was conducted throughout the month of May. Under this action, adverse reports of contamination with high levels of pesticide, insecticides have been found in several spices varieties sold by MDH and Everest, and thus these reports have now been received by the food regulator at center. Along with Everest and MDH, many local brands are also part of this recall and penalty. For instance, in case of Rajasthan state authorities seized about 12,000 kgs of various spices over alleged contamination. Earlier, on the alleged presence of ethylene oxide, FSSAI had indicated that 28 reports with no contamination in spice samples were reported, but the regulator was awaiting reports from 6 more labs. As we speak, many other reports are still under examination, so let's see what happens finally. Back to you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for those details, Timsi. Now, the Commerce Ministry has chalked out a detailed plan to achieve key deliverables during the first 100 days of the NDA 3.0. We learned from sources that the ministry's agenda includes the creation of e-commerce hubs and SOPs for free trade agreements, among others. Abhimanyu Sharma is here with all of those details. Abhimanyu, what does the Commerce Ministry's 100-day plan look like?
Conclusion of an FTA with Oman is a part of the government's 100 days agenda. Earlier, India had expressed reservations over an increase in petrochemical imports from the Middle Eastern country, as India has also added significant domestic capacity in the sector. India currently imports petroleum products from Oman and primarily exports agricultural products and machinery to the Middle Eastern country. Also, several other FTA negotiations are likely to witness some development, with India in all likelihood going to object to the European Union's CBAM at the WTO, even as talks are underway with the United Kingdom on the issues pertaining to minimum import price of Scotch whisky and a bilateral investment treaty. Also, the Commerce Ministry is in process of finalizing the standard operating procedure for expeditious signing and negotiation of FTAs with several countries and trading blocs. Several other issues are on the anvil on the agenda of the Commerce Ministry, which include creation of e-commerce hubs, an e-connect portal, a global trade promotion organization, and also the ministry is likely to reconsider portions of the Special Economic Zones Act to allow for sale of products outside the SEZs.
So Abhimanyu there with the Commerce Ministry's 100-day agenda. Thank you so much for those details. Now, the government's allies are learned to have asked that the Agnipath scheme, which is a tourist service style of armed forces recruitment, be reviewed. But such a review will have to carefully assess a host of parameters, especially the impact these changes would have on the fisc. CNBC TV 18's Sapna Das has more details. Sapna, while the BJP's allies have not formally demanded a review as yet, we learned that it is a request that has been made. So what are the factors that could play a role in any such review if it is indeed taken up?
Well, the first point that we'd like to clarify is that, there hasn't been any formal demand as such. Allies have been talking about it before the government was formed, and hence, from there emanates a kind of a concern, and that is basically on the fisc and the implication that that may have in terms of the defense modernization. So any kind of a review that happens potentially on the Agnipath scheme will have to be mindful of the fiscal implications. Agnipath had been brought in basically to manage the burgeoning pension bill of the defense forces. So it can't go the other way around. Having said that, for instance, around 23% of the defense budget goes towards pension payments, which is quite massive, so to speak. Also, as far as the core defense pension payments are concerned, well, this is under the OPS, that is the old pension scheme, which works on the principle of defined benefit and not defined contribution. So there is already a risk that the government is taking since so many years. Second, now with the rollout of the OROP as well, every 5 years the pensions have to be reviewed. For instance, in FY23, the government had taken a hit of around 23,000 crores in terms of clearing the OROP arrears, so to speak. Now, if you come to the Agnipath scheme, it's a straight 4-year tenure that we're talking about. There is no permanent retention of all the Agnivees, so to speak. Around 20-25% of the recruits are actually taken in, and there are no pension and retirement benefits. But if you start talking about a review of the Agnipath scheme from the point of view of an OPS or an OROP benefit, then the implications are quite different. Also, if you look at the numbers, around 1.49 lakh odd crore is the kind of budget that we're talking about in the current year as far as your defense pension payments are concerned. In comparison, of course, the Agnipath scheme is relatively new. The Agnipath scheme budget is somewhere around 6,000 crores for the current financial year. So the numbers are very plain and clear for anyone to kind of have a look. So this is so everything has to be kept in mind before the government goes in. So they will have to weigh the pros and cons extremely carefully, because this will also impact your resources, the resources available for your defense modernization, which is something that India cannot sacrifice.
All right, Sapna, many thanks for those details. Meanwhile, the Department of Personnel and Training has notified all ministries and government departments that the 3 new criminal laws would come into effect on the 1st of July. The laws were notified in December last year. Coming up on India Business Hour, as the government gets ready to present its first budget of this new term, real estate developers draw up their wish list. Details in just a bit. And you can also catch all CNBC TV 18's news and updates on Facebook's X, Threads, Instagram and JioCinema. The bodies of 46 Indian nationals who died in a massive fire in a building near Kuwait City have been brought back to India. An Indian Air Force flight carrying the mortal remains first arrived in Kochi, as about 23 of the victims were from Kerala. Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan and other ministers were present at the airport to pay their respects. Minister of State for External Affairs Kirti Vardhan, who coordinated with Kuwaiti authorities for the repatriation, also on board the aircraft. The Supreme Court will hear pleas seeking a CBI probe into the NEET UG entrance exam case on the 8th of July. Notices have been issued to the centre and the national testing agencies on the matter. While the NTA has been directed to file a response within 2 weeks, the centre has given time till next date of hearing. The top court also said it will examine NTA's plea to transfer petitions pending in high courts to the apex court on the 8th of July. And speaking of NEET, Education Minister Dharmendra Pradhan met a few students who appeared for the exam. The students were accompanied by their parents after they requested a meeting with him. The minister addressed their concerns and assured them that no injustice would be done to the students.
मैं आपको आश्वस्त करता हूं, मैंने आज वही विद्यार्थियों का किसी भी व्यक्ति को बख्शा नहीं जाएगा, वो एनटीए का हो या किसी व्यवस्था की हो, कोई प्राइवेट व्यक्ति हो, किसी को उसमें से सरकार बख्शेगी नहीं। छात्रों की भविष्य के साथ किसी को खिलवाड़ करने की अधिकार किसी को नहीं है।
The Karnataka High Court has directed the Crime Investigation Department to not arrest former State Chief Minister B.S. Yediyurappa in the POSCO case. This case is pertaining to an alleged harassment of a minor girl by the former Chief Minister. The arrest is on hold until the next date of hearing, which is on the 17th of June. The Indian Army has received the first batch of man-portable suicide drones called Nagastra 1. These drones are made to hit target precisely without putting soldiers' lives in jeopardy. The high-tech drones are designed and developed by India by Solar Industries subsidiary Economic Explosives. ByteDance has announced that it will lay off staff at its Indonesian unit after a deal where it bought a local e-commerce firm and combined it with its TikTok operations. The company has not revealed how many employees will get impacted. However, Bloomberg reported that 450 employees may be laid off. Israeli tanks advance into western Rafah even as the United Nations-backed ceasefire plan stays in limbo. UN has warned that more than 1 million people are expected to face death and starvation by the middle of July. Russian President Vladimir Putin has promised an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine if Kiev withdraws troops from 4 regions that Moscow annexed in 2022 and abandons plans to join the NATO. In a speech in Moscow, Putin said that he will begin negotiations with Ukraine if the conditions are met. His comments came at a time when the Ukraine Peace Summit is set to be held in Switzerland this weekend. Russia wasn't invited for the event. Staying with international news, Tesla shareholders have voted in favor of CEO Elon Musk's share-linked pay plan. The EV major valued the reinstated package at $44.9 billion in its April regulatory filing. This is the largest ever executive pay package at a US-listed firm. The approval comes 5 months after a Delaware judge scrapped the package, citing improper board approval. The green signal from shareholders strengthens Elon Musk's appeal of the Delaware ruling, but he still needs the court's approval to get the compensation. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman is likely to table the first union budget of NDA 3.0 in the Parliament on the 22nd of July. Sources tell CNBC TV 18 that a final decision on the date is awaited. Sitharaman will make history by becoming the first finance minister to present 7 consecutive budgets, 6 complete ones and 1 interim. She will surpass Morarji Desai's record of 6 consecutive budgets. The government is likely to present the economic survey on the 3rd of July. The real estate sector is out with its wish list after a spectacular 2023. Developers are looking forward to the union budget in July to keep the momentum going. From tax cuts to sustainability, they have laid down several expectations from the first budget of NDA 3.0. Shivani Bazaz gets us this special report.
Well, with the budget 2024-25 only days away, top real estate players and industry thought leaders have a wish list. They want benefits and higher incentives for real estate, anticipating a budget that addresses critical challenges, stimulates demand and aligns with the government's vision of sustainable growth. One long-standing demand that the players have pushed for is an industry status for the real estate. Listen in to why these demands are important.
The small and medium builders who they do really serve the society, their place is becoming very difficult. By granting the industry status for this industry, they are going to save at least 20,000 small and medium builders in India. So, to safeguard the interest of the small and medium builders, we need industry status so that they will MSME status they will get and the loans are available for them. So today the small builders are not eligible for most of the time for the bank loans because of various reasons. So what they are doing, they are borrowing from the private finance.
The government should give at least some kind of incentives, so that can be a stamp duty reduction. Likewise, in Maharashtra, they have given for the women empowerment the 1% of the stamp duty reduction. Then many of the women became the owner of the house. So likewise, if you give the stamp duty reduction from the green building, then certainly people will go for learning about it and the awareness will happen. So I would suggest them to give some incentives for the green building and sustainability to grow.
Many real estate players have also called for an expansion of the special window for affordable and mid-income housing stress fund and also tax relief for first-time home buyers and a reintroduction of GST with an input tax credit on under-construction properties. Industry bodies said that the government needs to work on making affordable housing a sustainable business model for developers.
The government has already addressed low-income housing and affordable housing, but I think a lot more needs to be done. Today, affordable housing is expensive and the private sector does not find enough sustainability in that business model because there is a lot that goes by way of taxes, by way of, excise duties, all kinds of things. If you can pare away the taxes, unless the private sector finds it useful and, sustainable as a business venture, they will not step into this.
Increased tax benefits should be given to women when they're investing in real estate projects. Subsidized home loans, reduced stamp duty, which I think some states have already implemented. Perhaps look at certain women housing schemes. I think that will be extremely interesting to see how women respond to it, and single window clearance.
From incentivizing green buildings to tax breaks for women home buyers, the real estate industry has a long wish list for the upcoming budget. How many of these wishes are granted, we'll have to wait and watch. In New Delhi with Vijay Saurabh Kumar, this is Shivani Bajaj for CNBC TV 18.
And with that, it is a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Many thanks for watching, but the news continues right here on CNBC TV 18.